practice of decapitating an enemy and taking their heads has been around among various groups throughout the world, seemingly as long as humans have been going to war. In most cases, these were simply used as trophies and displayed to attempt to deter their enemies. But the Jivaroan tribes of Ecuador and Peru took the practice to a whole other level, making something of an art of it in creating shrunken heads. As to their specific motivations for taking heads in the first place, it appears to be a combination of religious reasons and the classic trophy motivation. Tribal members at one point believed in the existence of a spirit called muisak that inhabits the human body and could potentially get revenge when a person was murdered. To block a muisak from doing this and to gain control over the soul of the victim, headhunters severed their enemies' heads and shrank them and called them tsantsas. The collection of the heads and the ritualistic shrinking was also thought to cause an increase of aritum, a sort of spirit power in a given warrior via stealing the original warrior's aritum spirit. It's also noteworthy here that without acquiring an aritum spirit through killing, they once believed that a boy could not survive into adulthood. Further, if one did not acquire new aritum spirits after a few years, the old aritum spirits would leave the warrior, thus the warriors needed to continually go on raids to acquire aritum for themselves. The benefit of having aritum, the more killings the better, was that it was thought to impart power to the possessor and protection from diseases and things like that. Additional motivation was revenging deaths of their own ancestors by taking blood revenge on enemy tribes, thus appeasing the spirits of their ancestors. As you might imagine, this all served as something of a deterrent to not mess with the Jivaroan tribes. So, going back to acquiring the heads, during battles with other tribes or invaders, such as when the tribes united to kill thousands of Spanish colonists around the turn of the 17th century, headhunter warriors would kill the enemy and decapitate them, or sometimes even decapitate them as the means of killing them. Once the head was off, the warrior's headband was put through the mouth and neck hole and tied over his shoulder for easy carrying when evacuating the village following an attack. If possible, they would also try to kill any elderly ladies and take the young ones back home. Okay, so this all brings us to the actual shrinking of the head. The process of shrinking the head happens in a couple of ways. Sometimes it would start immediately and take approximately 1 week, with warriors working on it while traveling back to their home village. In this case, upon completing a raid, warriors would meet somewhere a safe distance from the victimized village and start their work by making a slit in the neck up to the back of the severed head. This allowed the skin and hair to be peeled away from the skull. The skull would then be discarded as an offering to the pani, or anaconda, which the tribes considered to be a spirit helper. In other cases, if no long traveling was needed to get home, a festival of eating and drinking occurred back at the warrior's village while the shrinking heads were being boiled. On that note, as to the specific process of shrinking the heads, to start the shrinking process, the eyelids on the severed heads were sewn shut and the lips skewered closed with wooden pegs. Next, the head was simmered for about an hour and a half to 2 hours in a large boiling pot, which is how the actual shrinking takes place. This was a very precise process, as simmering the head too long would cause it to lose its hair, but not long enough would leave it gooey, and, well, nobody wants a gooey shrunken head. That would just be disgusting, right? Once removed from the pot, the head would be about 1/3 of its original size and the skin would be dark and rubbery. The skin would be turned inside out and any leftover bits of flesh would be scraped off with a knife. The scraped skin was then turned the proper side out again and the slit in the rear was sewn together. The process wasn't done yet though. The head was shrunk even further by inserting hot stones and sand to make it contract from the inside. This also tanned it in order to preserve it. Once the head reached the desired size and was full of small stones and sand, more hot stones would be applied to the outside of the face to seal the shape and features. The skin was rubbed with charcoal ash to darken it, and as the tribesmen believed, to keep the avenging soul from seeping out. The finished product was hung over a fire to harden and blacken, then the wooden pegs in the lips were pulled out and replaced with string in order to lash them together. The last step involved making a hole in the top of the head and inserting sticks or string so that it could be worn around the warrior's neck as a trophy. After the heads were complete, they were presented to the other villagers as a sign of victory, and a series of feasts and rituals followed in order to celebrate. Surprisingly, despite the amount of preparation that went into shrunken head making, they were often discarded immediately following the final celebration. Initially, they were fed to animals or given to children as toys, but as the heads were discovered by fascinated tourists and collectors, tribes began to trade them instead of destroying them. Specifically, Westerners began buying up shrunken heads in the late 1800s and early 1900s, causing the tribes to increase their rate of killing in order to supply the heads for trade. Guns were the usual currency traded for the heads, but knives were also popular. Demand for shrunken heads became so great that counterfeits became common. These were often made from the heads of monkeys and sometimes from heads obtained from morgues. In fact, there is speculation that about 80% of shrunken heads in private collections and museums were made in this way. Ultimately, the Peruvian and Ecuadorian governments outlawed trafficking in shrunken heads in the 1930s to discourage killing people for this purpose. This, along with the influx of Western culture and religion, has resulted in the practice of making these shrunken heads decline dramatically, to the point that there is some speculation that no authentic shrunken heads have been made in the 21st century. And now for a bonus fact. Speaking of heads, a commonly held belief is that you lose heat through your head faster than the rest of your body. But is this actually true? Well, yes and also no. Yes, because we humans typically are wearing a lot of clothing items over the rest of our bodies, thus reducing heat loss over much of our surface area while leaving one area, our heads, rather exposed. But also no, because outside of certain mechanisms to reduce heat loss through the extremities, in particularly cold situations, the body more or less loses heat over its surfaces proportional to the exposed surface area. So, if something like the head accounts for 10% of your surface area, it will be responsible for about 10% of the heat loss, give or take. As for the partial misconception, this seems to have been popularized by a US Army survival manual in the 1960s. It turns out the US Army conducted a study to test the loss of body heat in extremely cold temperatures. The results ended up giving rise to a section of the manual stating that a person, to quote, can lose 40 to 45% of body heat from an unprotected head. What goes largely ignored by the public is that the subject of the tests wore survival suits designed especially for the cold, thus were extremely insulated almost everywhere on their bodies, but they didn't wear anything on their heads. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that the subjects lost a large percentage of their body heat through their heads in this case. Thus, while wearing a hat or covering your head can make you feel warmer and protect you from the cold, it doesn't help any more than, say, wearing a jacket, which will cover a much larger surface area and thus is actually more important if you're choosing one item or the other.